Great to have you here. I wondered if we could just start and ask, after your previous book, The Strange Death of Europe, why write this book next? Why write this book now? And I guess part of me wants to ask you, is this what everyone's thinking on the inside anyways, and just not talking about?
That's what I think.
Okay.
In The Strange Death of Europe, I looked at immigration questions in Europe, Islam, and other topics most people want to keep away from. And I found, to my enormous pleasure, a wonderful audience in all sorts of countries, so many countries, and so many people who just seemed to me, and this is the best thing ever for an author, because as an author you put a book out and you don't know if anyone's going to read it, but seemed to me to gain satisfaction and pleasure, encouragement in a way, from the fact that somebody was thinking about this and was trying to address the things they were trying to address. And what I realized was, of course, is that in all of our countries at the moment, in all the sort of liberal Western democracies, we've become incredibly bad at talking. And because we've become bad at talking, we've become bad at thinking. And I'd noticed the things that are the main subjects in the madness of crowds. I'd noticed them for years, and I started looking into them. Why did people's careers keep on getting destroyed over the same things? Why did the mob keep coming for people who misspoke on things to do with gender or race or sexuality, and what was really going on? And I wanted to look into that. I wanted to explain it, and to say basically what I think people want to be thinking about, because I don't think there's any harm in open conversation. I don't think there's any harm in actual exchange of ideas. I have a real confidence that bad ideas get chased out by good ones. I've got a sort of unbelievable confidence in this idea. And I think our societies don't have that confidence anymore. In fact, we seem terrified of ideas, terrified of bad ideas. The bad ideas might catch on and then we'll all become bad. No, if you allowed yourself to have the conversation, then the bad ideas can't win. So, yeah, having trodden on one set of landmines, I decided to go hopping merrily across all the rest.
Were you concerned when you published your previous book that you might be completely vilified and no one was going to read it and people were going to hate you?
I don't know. I was. I've written 5 books now, and wrote my first book when I was 18. And I view it as being, you write things, you put them out there, you hope there's a readership. But I don't particularly mind about the response. I mean, you want a good response, but that's not why I write. I wasn't so worried about criticism on the last book. I was worried about some of the subjects I was over then are really dangerous subjects. And I know that to my own cost, and a lot of friends have discovered that at their own cost. So I was worried about that a little bit. But again, I mean, you have to weigh these things up. Is it better to talk or not to talk, to speak or not to speak? And I think it's better to speak.
And that's really what this book is about. It's about having these conversations that right now are unpopular, and typically, maybe mostly on social media, seem to be completely dominating the conversation and going in very, very strange ways. And I know you travel the world and meet people. I meet people all the time, and yet I don't have these conversations with real people in person. They seem to a lot of times happen out there.
What sort of conversation?
The ones where we are vilifying someone for doing this, or there's a big stink about someone saying something about,
the scandal culture.
Yeah, all that seems to sometimes happen mostly in the Twitterverse and not always in real life.
That's true, but sometimes these two things meet. In fact, they meet a lot these days.
Yeah.
You see, I think we're all lying about a whole range of things, and mainly to do with these issues I address in The Madness of Crowds. And I think that there's a cost to that, as I say, of bad ideas seeping into the whole system. And individuals in their lives, I think, know this and can feel it. Not everybody, but broadly speaking by now, if you don't think that the sort of woke intersectional culture is coming for you, then it's only because you're self-employed. Like the only people I know who aren't now worried about this are self-employed. They don't go into an office. They don't need to speak to people. I mean, everybody you see, people used to think it was just the education field or academia or something. And then one of the things I discovered as I was researching this book was, no, it's everywhere. It's like the corporate world. People in big banks and big corporations and energy companies and media, of course. They all have these diversity departments and diversity enforcement departments and human resources departments and all these sorts of things, which are in some companies the only really growing bit of the company. I mean, they're doing really well, some of these human resources people. But so many people I've spoken to in recent years, they're trying to work this stuff out because it's all being imposed on them. And of course, it's got some good in it. It's got some good intentions in it. It's just what it's going to lead us to all is hell. So everybody's sort of thinking about this, but they're not able to speak about it. And if they do, they are a serious likelihood of losing their job. I mean, there are very, very famous examples of people who've just slipped up once. You know, Tim Hunt, Nobel Prize-winning scientist, does a joke at a conference in South Korea. And one woman in the room says that it's a sexist joke, and by the time he's back in the UK, he's fired from every position. Every position. There are cases, famous cases like the James Damore case in Google. You know, Google says they want some ideas. This, tech guy gives some ideas, bang, he's out. And people learn from that. They learn not to speak, not to air worries and concerns. So I think it's the self-appointed task of those of us who do not have wobbly hierarchies over us to speak.
And that's why writers can talk about this stuff more freely than a lot of other people.
I think we're the only people who can now.
Right. And with James at Google, it was interesting because he really put together a very articulate argument about talking about, I think it was why there are more men coders than women at Google. And Google's an intelligent company, but at the same time, they were living in a reactionary culture and they kind of had to do something. And so the smartest decision for them was to get rid of him. Yeah. But it didn't really make a lot of sense logically.
Yeah. Well, that's because there are lies we tell ourselves. And you need to enforce the lie. And you need to enforce the lie by punishment beatings of truth tellers. So if you say, maybe there are some differences between the sexes, whoa, you're already in trouble. I mean, you're going into dangerous terrain already. And really what it is there are a whole set of things in our society that we don't look at because we know what the answers can't be. And if somebody comes up with one of the answers that it can't be, you've got to shut them up. You've got to get rid of them.
What's an example of that?
Well, as I say, the Damore case is a very good example.
Right.
But that happens with some regularity. Because there are very painful things that keep coming up. I mention in the book, in the race chapter, one of the reasons I'm so worried about this retreat to identity and this retreat to characteristics is everything down the road from it is hell. And I write in the race chapter in The Madness of Crowds about the Harvard admissions scandal, which is extraordinary. And there is an example of trying not to come to certain conclusions and as a result, doing terrible things. This is, for anyone who doesn't know, this is a lawsuit taken out against Harvard by a group of Asian students who say that the admissions procedure, in order to try to introduce fairness into the admissions process at Harvard and to allow people of various ethnic backgrounds to get in, was prejudiced against Asian students because they knew that more Asian students would be able to get in than other ethnic groups, and so they downgraded all Asian applicants on character traits without meeting them. And that's the sort of dark stuff you get into if you don't have a more honest conversation. And You know, I understand some of the fear because honest conversations can be dangerous anyway. They can be risky. They can certainly be hurtful. But in the end, what's better? Going through a bit of that pain, or making an entire society go through the pain of constantly reinforcing lies?